We start things off with a man who's no stranger to the program, veteran journalist Ken Ali. A special good evening to you, Mr. Ali.
Good evening to you, Mikey, and your many viewers and listeners.
Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
We're in election mode. I mean, last week we saw where the UNC held its public meeting at Naprima College in San Fernando. And of course, later on that week, we have the PNM holding their public meeting at the San Fernando City Hall. So that tells us a lot as far as San Fernando, the target, and what both parties want to accomplish. Now, on the platforms, we've heard a lot about personal criticism and many issues as far as especially dealing with the ruling, the Privy Council's ruling, that the government could not extend the term of local government elections by a year. But when we get to the meat of it, the core of it, some of these bread and butter issues seem to be overlooked. And what say you as things are starting to shape up to be quite a political battle?
Well, the first thing is we really do not have a local government campaign in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a national referendum on the performance of the government and the suitability of the opposition to take over. So the issues are not likely to be local. Trinidad, of course, is a small society, and what affects one a community is likely to affect many others. So I don't see a community campaign, maybe in a few areas and so on, but generally it's going to be a national campaign, a referendum on the government's performance and on the quality of life. Now, it is clear that the PNM has laid out what they think should be the election issue, and that is corruption. In a very shrewd way, they've timed the release of the Piaco report. They gave it to a reporter, The Express. Now, before we go on, the Engineers Association, the Surveyors Association, and many others through the years have called for that Commission of Inquiry report to be made public in the Parliament, and that has not been done. Here you have, this was a taxpayer's expense, the report of a Commission of Inquiry being released to a reporter of a daily newspaper. So it is clear what the government is all about. They want to push the agenda of corruption. I think the opposition responding on that issue, they respond effectively and timely. They have a number of issues they could talk about, including, in particular, the WGTL issue that cost taxpayers $3.1 billion. And you remember this government withdrew the litigation against Malcolm Jones and others. And there are several others. The Unicot contract, cost of Prime Minister's official residence in Tobago rising from 25 to 63 million, and so on and so forth, all of those issues. So it depends on how the UNC would see it. But the issue, as you rightly said, in Trinidad and Tobago are bread and butter and quality of life issues. Crime, of course, is by far the major issue, but there are a lot of people suffering because of joblessness, underemployment, in which they do in jobs in the informal sector and they're not well paid and so on. And there's a lot of poverty in the country, starvation, poor nutrition, a lot of people living under the poverty line and so on. So there is that issue, and I think if the opposition prosecutes it well. You know, one of the things, Mikey, I've been looking at, and I looked at some statistics quite recently, the cost of foodstuff in many cases, and I could quote some specific examples I don't have in front of me, but I've written about it quite recently. Cost of some basic foodstuffs have gone up by as much as 100% over the last 2 years, whereas public officers, people in the public sector, are getting 4%. In addition to the cost of foodstuff, we have the cost of fuel going up. The cost of pharmaceuticals have gone up. I've said before in your program that we have a monopoly importing pharmaceuticals, and in the first year they reported 49.7% increased profit. So how did they record that increased profit? So the bottom line out of all of this is the quality of life of the average person has gone down. People can't afford to pay the rent, they can't afford to eat well, nutrition, and so on, all the attendant issues.
And I agree with you on that point. And you see, somewhere along the line, that may be lost when the fact of, when it's a tit for tat of corruption, it doesn't mirror the reality that people face on a daily basis. I mean, it seems as though the middle class has been wiped out completely.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's a serious reality. And I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know if people are going to be motivated based on the fact that, which allegation is stronger, rather than the fact that how are you going to improve my quality of life? And if you're talking about, for example, counselors, which are in the first line of service when it comes to the government operating, what about garbage collection? What about stray dogs? What about keeping my recreational parks groomed and maintained? What about property tax? What am I getting for that? And there's so many questions that I'm sure the average individual, the average citizen would like to have answered, rather than people mounting a platform and saying, listen, he went off with this bag and she went off with that bag. The essence of it to me, and I don't know if you agree with it, that this seems to be more than just an election. It seems as though it's been something that people are quite anxious about. They're ready to go out there. According to Professor Hamid Ghani, the local government elections may be regarded as a barometer of public opinion on the government's performance. And if the turnout were to exceed 50%, which has never happened before, well, it could be quite possible.
Well, those are also my thoughts. Like I said at the start, it's a referendum on the government's performance, but it depends on the opposition whether it could effectively prosecute those issues through its speeches and its campaign and so on, or whether it would play catch-up and respond to what the government is doing. The government, in its typical form, has sought to place what it considers the issues on the agenda and would seek to prosecute those. But the opposition could respond. Those are issues 20 years ago, and they do not impact the quality of life now. The course of justice has taken its turn, and it is not the average person's fault that it has taken so long for justice to be dispensed. But what is of concern right now are the issues we talk about, and you were just talking about matters in the environment. In addition to that, we have to add the number of people who are vagrant. I've seen more vagrants, I think, that I have seen in previous time, including there are a number of people who were not the vagrants or pavement dwellers, but a number of people who came from Venezuela who are now begging arms. And what is instructive, as I mentioned, Venezuela, is that a number of people, like thousands of people who fled to Trinidad from Venezuela, some are seeking to get back. And in Venezuela, 90% of the people live under the poverty line. So when people are fleeing from Trinidad and Tobago and looking to head back to Venezuela, it's an indictment on us. I see a number of them at the street corners outside the banks and the groceries and so on, and begging, and they have their children and so on. It is because they have not settled into Trinidad and Tobago. They do not have access to the education system, to healthcare and so on. So we have a huge issue, as I was saying, quality of life, people's inability to properly feed themselves and their families. And it is up to the opposition, really, whether it could get that message out in a timely manner, in an effective manner to the population.
What about keeping party loyalists in line as far as the whole racial issue? Dr. Rowley recently said that he is a proud black man. Are we seeing that rearing its head again as far as race and trying to keep the loyalists in line, us versus them?
Yes, Dr. Rowley is a merchant of race. He does it all the time, but he does it in a very tactful, succinct way. And he always puts race into his discourse. And I think what he is trying to say is that he must be proud of me. This is an organization built around blackness, urban organization and so on. And those fellas and those people are not suited for governance. They don't understand our ethics and our way of life and so on. And he does it subtly, and he did it again in that meeting in San Fernando you alluded to earlier, and when he put the issue of race on the agenda. It's unfortunate that the church and the civil organizations, the trade unions, and academic organizations and business organizations and so on do not call him out on it. We had Kavit Robinson Regis making a statement in Arima recently on the matter of race and so on. Those are unfortunate in a diverse society where race relations are not exactly what it ought to be. But I hope that people will be policing this, including the media, and get people to exercise some restraint on the platform.
Yeah, I really hope so. I mean, really and truly. But however, as we all know, it is a fight. It is a political battle. And most times people are going to bring out whatever they believe is going to give them that edge so that they can be victorious at the polls. According to Winford James, he said the government may be at a disadvantage here because they're presiding over the governance of the country, which is plagued by problems such as crime, as you mentioned, poor infrastructure where roads are concerned, and where the utilities are concerned, like water and electricity. So again, these basic amenities seem to be sidelined, when in fact now we're hearing about the airport and other issues. We're also hearing through the grapevine that there may be some audit report on some of the corporations that are not controlled by the People's National Movement. So we do expect that this is going to be quite a battle.
But if Dr. James said, I didn't read Dr. James's comment, but I'm taking up on what he said. If he said the government is at a disadvantage, it's because the government placed itself as at a disadvantage. You know, Mikey, the current national budget for this fiscal year is $61.4 billion. That's the largest budget we've had in a long time. This government used to criticize the Kamala Persad-Bissessar administration for a $60 billion budget. We have a $61.4 billion. They've just added $3.8 billion into it. A lot of it goes to the ministry or that deals with social welfare and so on. So one expects that a lot will be dispersed. Whether it's going to be done on an equitable manner, whether it is a lot of political handles, we do not know. In addition to that, the Ministry of Works is now just on the eve of the election beginning to repair roads and so on. That means the provision of jobs and provision of opportunities for small contractors and so on. But if the roads deteriorated, it's because of bad governance over the years. And so the government must hold itself responsible, you know, for the state of the society in every way. But it is not at the media presentation of the budget, the supplementary budget recently, Mr. Imbert, the Minister of Finance, indicated that the economy had rebounded well, which is the subject of another discussion.
Yeah.
It does not. It is because there was a bounce in the price of natural gas, in particular because of the Ukrainian-Russian war. But on the basis of the extra funds that we got, the government ought to have improved the quality of life, and we are not seeing that.
Yeah. But also taking into consideration all that is taking place, I mean, and all that we're hearing, the government, and you're right, the government is out doing some work in certain key areas where we're hearing talk about individuals who have left one party and have gone across to another party. So I guess they're simply saying, listen, is it about self, or do you think, what's your take on these things?
I think it's about self. I mean, parties and government have the state resources, they have the taxpayer resources. There's a lot of poverty and hardship in the country, and the government could easily throw funds around, create jobs, and do things. And it is always a public relations gain to pull somebody across. They may or may not bring electoral support with them, but especially in the eve of an election. I've heard stories about the people who switch sides. I mean, I'm not going to repeat them. I don't know if they are correct. Right. But, you know, just to make the point again, that parties in office have state funds which they could utilize to improve the quality of life of some people.
Yeah, and you're right. And I guess that in itself is going to motivate people when it comes to saying, listen, this is the finance, this is what you need. But getting back to, now we're talking about property tax. That's something else that's there. But it seems as though many of the issues, the government is simply buying time. The scrap iron dealers was told, hold on for the next 6 months. You have those at Carry Dock who are on a follow, I believe, 90 days. But then Dr. Rowley came and said, listen, if after 90 days there's no work in Carry Dock, then there's no need for them to return. And that's a message that is basically saying, listen, hold on, we're buying time. Does it then also confirm that even before the Privy Council ruling, the government knew that they couldn't, what they were doing with the extension was not lawful, but yet still they needed that time to put their house in order?
And I always felt, yes, I think so. I always felt that the Prime Minister wasn't going to go up full yet, but he had lulled the opposition into thinking, well, there's going to be a local election toward the end of the year because we asked for a year. but he could have called before. He called the general election, the last one in August, and I always felt he would have gone to the middle of the year before the presentation of the new budget, which will be presented sometime in September, and after the supplementary budget, where he got almost $4 billion more. So there's more money into the system. The Minister of Finance is boasting. More roads have been fixed, more hampers have been given away, and so on. And I always felt he would have looked for an August-September window, but sought to lull the opposition into thinking, well, go and enjoy your vacation, July, August, and so on. I'm going to call an election at the end of the year. But I think he's coming true to form, and I always felt that the election was going to take place then, and it seems that that is going to become reality.
Well, we look forward to your participation, all of your writings, everything that's going to come out of this, whether it be a local or general. I know you're going to be on top of things. Any closing comments for the viewers?
Yeah, I think I urge the country to be very focused on the election, on the campaign, to distill fact from fiction, and to understand that this is one of the very few times in which you get an opportunity to present to the people who are seeking electoral office, and to discuss with them and to utilize your vote in a sensible way that hopefully could impact the final decision and have the ultimate effect of improving the quality of your life.
Thank you so much. We'll be checking in with you as the campaign progresses. Thank you so much. All the best of luck to you and your team.
Yeah, thank you, and best wishes.